This will be my video review of the Saddleback leather classic briefcase in the large size. The color of this particular briefcase is dark coffee brown. This is the large, which is the middle size that they have. This is a direct competitor of the bag that I've reviewed in my other video reviews, specifically the Texbo briefcase. I had the opportunity to purchase this bag about a month ago, so it has seen a month of semi-regular wear, though I do use my Texbo as my daily driver bag. This bag has been used several times, and I feel like I've used it enough at this point to develop some opinions and be able to give a little bit more of an informed review. In the coming weeks and months, please expect on my channel to have head-to-head comparisons between this bag and the Texbo bag. I will actually be purchasing a brand new version of the Texbo bag for an upcoming birthday for a family member, and I thought that would be the perfect opportunity to do some head-to-head comparison videos. So that should be coming up soon. This particular video, we will just be looking at the Saddleback bag by itself. So just initially, the initial impression of the bag, very much the same classic design we see that Saddleback has become famous for. This bag, though with similar dimensions and similar weight as the Texbo bag, as I talked about in my previous review, holds the shape a little bit better of the classic Saddleback look. If we walk through the different parts of this bag from top to bottom, we can start with the strap here. So the strap on this bag is thicker, and the leather itself, as will be the case throughout this whole bag, is made of a much thicker material. It is a very, very well-made leather, well-treated, and as you can tell, is one that will stand the test of time. The straps themselves also are very well-made, very well-treated, and very thick by themselves. If you look here, there is a very nice thickness to this edge here, and there is a lot of thickness within this pad itself. The strap itself is held together in two separate parts by one very solid buckle, and there are two fixed location straps here in which the excess strap will be able to go down. The ends of these straps are held down by clips that you find in dog leashes. Also made of very tough material, spins extremely easily, and seems also to be made to stand the test of time. This strap, if we were to compare it to the Texbo strap, I would say is made of thicker material, is a little bit more stiff, as well as particularly these pads here. I'm hoping over the period of the next several months start to break in, but at this point they are a lot softer, but at the same time they are a lot less flexible, and I find on my shoulder, as this leather currently stands, it doesn't conform to my shoulder very well. As with the Texbo bag, when I first got it, it conformed very nicely to my shoulder. And I'll again point out the second strap here is fixed in its location, though this leather right now as it stands doesn't seem to be a huge, barrier to the location of the strap, though if I were to run it significantly shorter or significantly longer, I could see a situation in which having a fixed strap location could be a hindrance to this particular bag. But overall, the individual components, I would say, far, far superior. These are also held down with rivets as well. Also made of two continuous pieces of leather that you can see here, which are sewn together. There is some stitching, I don't know if I would call them defects, that appeared when I first got it. You can see a little piece of this stitch that is just kind of frayed off initially, but otherwise has not caused any other issues. The handle of this bag, the handle of the Saddleback bag actually has a piece of leather plastic tubing that goes through the middle that helps it hold its shape a little bit better. If you look, it does fit my hand fairly well, though it's not as soft and supple as the Texbo was. if you look in some video reviews online, you'll see people who have actually removed the plastic tubing. You can kind of feel it if you were to put your hand inside. That gives it a shape. The surface of this bag, if we look at the individual pieces of leather here, the bag, when it first came to me, had a much more of a plastic feel than the Texbo bag. This bag comes treated very differently than the Texbo bag does. So this leather is actually very tough and has a very shiny quality to it initially. Over the course of the last month, it has slightly started to break in a little bit and feel a little bit more supple and soft, though the Texbo day one was a very, very soft leather. This center strap here, same thing, very thick, very well made, has 3 separate rivets holding down in place, as well as stitching holding it down in place as well. The individual holes for the strap to go through have held up fairly nicely. The second hole I've actually used quite a bit over the last month, and I haven't noticed any issues other than the fact that the leather is starting to wear in a little bit. Moving to the side of this bag also has 3 separate D-rings as the Texbo does, and is held down very well. You can very easily tell the components used in this bag are far, far superior to what you would see in the Texbo bag. The metal itself is much larger, it's much thicker gauge, and it seems to have a more robust character to each individual part. Everything just seems to bend, move a little bit smoother. Same thing here with the rivets. There's a rivet and stitching right at the top of the most used D-ring. And then on the side here, there's a second rivet holding it in place with further stitching. The pockets of this bag in the Saddleback slightly differ with the Texbo in that there are actually, if you look here, tiny little holes for, I'm guessing if you have any leaks, for them to come out of from any drinks you have. It also, this leather is a much thicker and therefore far less flexible than the Texbo came in, which was just basically conformed to this whole side and didn't have this kind of outpouching effect. This pocket itself, I would say, is roughly about the same size as the Texbo pocket and the same depth as well, though I do like those 2 little notches at the bottom that I would, I guess, call drainage holes. The back of this bag. Now, as you heard in my previous reviews, this O-ring, or the equivalent kind of D-ring that you saw in the Texbo bag, was where I was holding my USB drive. Given the size of this ring, I actually have a lot of trouble flipping it to the front, and I don't think it looks as nice, so my USB drive has now kind of been designated to the inside of my bag. This back pocket here, kind of the theme for today is the thickness of this leather. So you could clearly tell that the leather used here is not only far superior, but also far thicker than the leather used in the Texbo bag itself. Same pocket, same size. However, this leather doesn't have the same lining that the Texbo does. It's a kind of raw leather underneath that you can feel. It feels very, very nice, though I will tell you, it is kind of frustrating trying to get sheets of paper in here. With my Texbo bag, everything just kind of slid right in and slid right out very, very quickly. This bag, pieces of paper seem to catch. I've had a couple pieces of paper wrinkle on the bottom end that ends up at the bottom of the bag, which I typically never saw with my Texbo. If anything, it was the top then where the paper would get wrinkled. As for these secondary straps that we have here, which are can be used as belts, same story as with the strap. It is made of far, far thicker material than what the Texbo is. I will say these individual holders that hold the strap in place are made wider and larger than Texbo's was. I found with Texbo straps, sometimes getting that strap in and out was a chore, trying to slide in and pull it. This one goes much smoother. The bottom of this bag. Now, as you can see, just kind of with me laying the bag down here, this bag holds its shape extremely well, which is great for, you know, any objects that end up in the bottom of the bag, and if you want the bag to retain its look. The downside of this is it is very, very deep. If you look at the bottom here. The beauty that I really liked of the Texbo bag with the softness of the leather, and I guess not as thick leather, was it was very collapsible. When you put the bag down, these individual sections at the bottom would kind of just fold up on themselves like that. This bag holds its shape really well. Now, over time, granted, it may start folding in depending on how much I load this bag, but for now, this width on the bottom has been something that I've been getting used to, that I just wasn't used to for my previous bag, but doesn't necessarily mean is better or worse. This uses the exact same kind of protective strap that runs underneath that kind of protects the rest of this leather a little bit when you're throwing the bag down on the ground, which I do very much enjoy because, as you know from my previous videos, I throw my bags around a lot and they do tend to get quite dirty, and it's far, far easier to clean 2 individual straps than it is to try to clean a whole surface. As you've noticed, probably in some other video reviews, if you're planning on buying this bag, people constantly talk about the thickness of the leather here, the total amount of leather and individual pieces, and just how thick these pieces are here. You could definitely notice that, and that is definitely a significant difference than the Texbo bag, which does not use this level of thickness within its leather. It's also made of single solid pieces of leather, including down areas where you can't see. It's just one giant piece of leather that extends from the bottom here across the top over to the front, which does make this bag look extremely beautiful and look just very, very nice and kind of well made, a bit like a tank. Along the bottom here is also one single piece of leather that just makes a U shape all the way around. Overall, I would say the front, the parts, and the individual pieces of this bag, each individual part is clearly superior to what Texbo offers. From the thickness of the leather, the quality of the leather, the quality of the stitching that's done, and the quality of the individual materials. Now, whether that translates into a bag that's more reliable or less reliable is a little bit difficult to tell, and I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but what I mean by that is my other bag, made of not as nice material, has survived 2 years of very, very tough and just hard work and has had 0 issues. Now, this bag could probably survive 1,000 times that. Do you necessarily need all of this? I'm not certain. I mean, it is definitely over-engineered, and you definitely are getting a far, far superior product for what is also a far higher cost. Now, one thing I do want to speak to, because I have noticed some comments about this online, as it pertains to the stitching on the Texbo bag. A lot of people say, you know, along the front, what you see here appears to be dual stitching, but then when you look at the leather, there's only one layer of stitching. The Saddleback actually utilizes the exact same design principle, where they use dual stitching up front, but only one extends all the way through to hold the pieces of leather together. So if it works for Saddleback and it also works for Texbo, I don't exactly count this as a design flaw. Now onto the inside of the bag, you could see here that this bag on the inside is designed very differently and just very, very beautiful on the inside here. This is pigskin leather, and there is this bar across the top that helps it from deforming in shape. As you may have remembered when I talked about my previous review with the 20-month update of the Texbo bag, one of the frustrating areas was that without this bar here, the leather along the middle was creasing and deforming every time I carried the bag and was not filling it all the way. This pigskin leather extends all the way down, and I really do like this leather. To me, this leather and the nylon that's used in the Texbo bag are fairly similar. What I will say is frustrating is, again, this soft touch kind of leather on the side that is part of this full thickness leather really gets caught when you're putting things in here, especially when you're putting papers. It gets extremely frustrating because you'll put it in and you'll think it's all the way down, but it's not. It's halfway down because it's getting caught on these individual parts. Along the bottom here, you will see again, it is also raw leather, and it has this classic kind of area where you could flip it up and down to hide stuff along the bottom. I haven't utilized it yet, but it does appear to be, you know, something that could be used. You also have here the extra keychain that I find extremely useful in the Texbo bag, and I'm sure will be extremely useful in the Saddleback bag as well. Now, one very surprising thing I noticed that I honestly did not think would happen when I switched from my Texbo to the Saddleback was I was expecting within the Saddleback bag that I would actually have a much easier time throwing objects in. And I mean that by the fact that this bag holds its shape much, much better. So you would think that when you were trying to put computers and iPads and notebooks and, you know, books into here, that it would be very easy to slide far more in because it's already open. And actually the exact opposite is the case. Because of how thick and how tough this leather is and how much it holds its shape, I find that it's very difficult when you're at the limit and you need to expand the size of the bag a little bit more. I'm constantly prying it open and then trying to shove something in really quickly. And it was something very surprising. In the Texbo bag, it just naturally opens up and it conforms to the shape of whatever you're trying to put in, likely due to the fact that their leather is a little bit thinner and they're lining the inside with nylon. Now, to the front pockets, these two front pockets. Another thing I noticed that surprised me and I did not expect to think was these pockets are more shallow than the Texbo pockets. Texbo pockets are actually a lot deeper. And what that means was everything that I had kept in these two pockets in my Texbo was suddenly now almost at the top or sticking over the top of the Saddleback, and I had to readjust how I filled these pockets. The second thing I noticed was because of the leather that's used, these pockets just kind of stay open and hold their shape really nicely, which is great, except for the fact that when this bag falls over or is put on its side, things start rolling out and falling out, which did not happen in the Texbo bag because it was made of nylon and it kind of conformed to the shape of the object it was in and wasn't holding this kind of stuck open shape that this bag has. Now, in exchange, this bag does have two separate smaller pockets on either side, which I have adapted to hold the objects that were much longer and stuck out over the top, and also objects that definitely can't slide around and move. And it holds really well because it's two pieces of leather rubbing against each other, and it kind of just stays there and doesn't move around. So, overall impressions of this bag. Initially, when I got this bag, it, out of the box, I would say, was very, very impressive, looked very beautiful. I was a little bit surprised by how plasticky the leather felt, but over time it has definitely started to wear in and has definitely started to build that kind of look in the leather I really like. And you can definitely notice it here, if I hold it up for you, along the edge where this strap is constantly pulling. You can see it's starting to get nice and soft and pliable. Along the bottoms of where I put the bag down, it's starting to build that character as well. The one thing that is very, very nice about this bag is it is much more resistant to scratches than the Texbo bag was. The one thing I always talked about the Texbo bag was I was constantly, doing spot treatments to cover things up. This bag, even in the last month, if you look here, has already caught itself one pretty decent scratch. And it's so well hidden. Now, as this bag ages over time, I do expect this leather to get a lot softer, but the break-in period for this bag is significantly longer than the break-in period for the Texbo bag. As for treatment, I am sure someone's going to have the question, how exactly did I treat this bag? I know in my previous videos, I discussed the difference between the Chambermaid's leather milk and the leather honey, and that I preferred the leather honey when it came to the Texbo bag. I will say, when I first got this bag, I was a little bit nervous about putting leather honey on it, so I again stuck with the Chamberlain's just to kind of see how it would respond and how it would do, and it did really well. It, softened the leather a little bit. It smelled really, really nice, and it took away probably that first layer of sealing, whatever sealing the leather in, and made it a little bit less plasticky. But then I had a nagging suspicion. I really wanted to know what would happen if I put the leather honey on. So I decided to do a small spot treatment on one part of the strap, and I liked how it looked. And I actually have used the leather honey on the whole bag, and I will say there was a significant difference when I used the leather honey. The leather honey really softened the leather. If you look at some of the videos online of new bags, you'll see when they try to flip it back, this piece right here kind of holds its shape and doesn't just naturally fall all the way back. And this bag was originally like that. And then after the application of the honey, the leather just softened so much that things are kind of starting to fall into place a little bit better and conform to shapes a little bit better, and feeling less like a stiff, hard leather and more like a soft, supple leather, though still not to the degree that the Texbo bag feels, though it's very different leather. So final conclusions, what can we tell between the two bags? The Saddleback bag, clearly a superior bag, clearly a better bag, clearly better design with better materials, better pieces, better leather, thicker leather, better stitching, more attention to detail. However, this bag does have a few flaws compared to what I would call kind of a knockoff or a homage to this bag, which is first that it holds its shape really well, and as a result of that, it has a huge footprint, which causes a lot of issues when you're trying to just throw this bag into the trunk of a car or into the back seat and realize that it's taking up twice as much room as your old Texbo bag. Second of all, that these pockets are actually much harder to put things into, mostly as a function of how thick the leather is and the fact that the leather doesn't contain, most of the leather doesn't contain any lining. It gets really hard to put papers down in the back when it would just really nicely, easily slide in. It gets really hard to just flip open the bag with one hand and shove my iPad in when this is already full. Instead, I kind of have to pry it open and then find a spot. And then it gets very frustrating when every time I open this bag after this bag's been knocked around, everything that's in these two pockets that are loose and not big and kind of wedged in fall out, and I find them in different parts of the bag, and I'm kind of nervous one day they will fall out of the bag without me ever noticing. However, plus sides, these parts made of far better material. These pockets, far better design with the little kind of notches on the bottom, and the fact that they're about the same size is perfect because I could put the exact same things in. The fact that this leather is treated differently and withstands tears and cuts and damage a little bit better, I would say is definitely a plus to the Saddleback, though I will say I do enjoy the fact that the Texbo kind of came out of the box already worn in, already soft, already very supple. I know this will kind of take time, and hopefully this will start to pick up the exact same type of wear. In the end, it is very much a personal preference. At the current price of the Saddleback bag, you can purchase 4 Texbo bags. Whether or not you think it's worth it is completely up to you. I will say that the Texbo is still financially a very great deal for the type of bag you're getting. It is incredibly affordable and cheap given what you do receive. However, this bag is likely very much still a superior bag. There's a couple things Texbo has done a little bit better than Saddleback has, and I would say Saddleback probably could take a page out of their book and learn a little bit from their knockoff competitors and maybe make a few changes to very small pieces of detail, such as the fact that maybe you don't want to make the second strap here to hold your leather strap in place fixed and rather make it slidable. That might, I think, make a couple consumers extremely happy to hear. It may be a little helpful to consider different lining on the inside of the bag, though I know that does adjust the character of the bag a little bit and takes away from the simplicity of what makes the Saddleback superior. So over the next couple weeks, expect to see head-to-head comparisons of the individual parts of this bag. So I will take this Saddleback and I will take one part of it and compare it head to head visually against the Texbo bag, and you can see the exact differences on video between the two manufacturers and what exactly is different and what exactly is advantageous in one company as compared to another in its design. So stay tuned.